I travel for work pretty frequently, mostly domestic, and I've been using Airbnb for years without a single problem. I say that because it matters for understanding why I wasn't especially cautious when I booked the place in Phoenix last February. It was a one-bedroom apartment in a newer complex. Entire unit listed as private, good photos, fast Wi-Fi mentioned in the description because I needed that for calls. The host had something like 60 verified reviews and a 4.8 average. I booked it for a week and didn't think about it again until I was driving from the airport. The apartment was on the second floor of a complex that looked like 100 other Phoenix complexes. Stucco exterior, palm trees in the parking lot, a pool I never used. The unit itself was clean and modern, furnished in that standard Airbnb way. The gray couch, the IKEA shelving, the geometric mountain print on the wall. Nothing personal. It was a work rental. I was there to do my job. First 2 days were completely normal. Back-to-back calls, takeout food, early nights. The host, a woman named Diane, had messaged once when I arrived to confirm I'd found everything okay. That was the only contact I expected. On the third day, she messaged again. "Just checking in," she said. "Wanted to make sure the Wi-Fi was working." Fine, some hosts are attentive. That night, she messaged a third time about parking lot maintenance the next morning. I thanked her. The following morning, she asked if the noise had bothered me. Then that afternoon came the message about the coffee. She asked if I'd found the coffee she'd left in the cabinet. I had found it, used it both mornings, but I sat with that message for a while before I typed back. The cabinet with the coffee wasn't the first one you'd open. It wasn't above the machine or next to the mugs. It was the one to the left of the sink, slightly out of the way. I'd found it on day one when I was checking what was available. I hadn't opened it since. I told myself she probably just remembered putting it there and was being friendly. Hosts leave things for guests all the time and follow up about them. That's a completely normal thing to do. But I kept coming back to the phrasing. Not, "Did you find the coffee?" in a general way. She'd said the cabinet. Like she knew which one. And if she knew I hadn't opened that particular cabinet again after the first day, she'd have to have some way of knowing that. I sat on the couch and tried to build a version of events where that was innocent. Maybe she assumed I hadn't found it because I hadn't mentioned it. Maybe she was just making conversation and the word cabinet meant nothing. I almost got there. Then I thought about which cabinet it was, and the doubt came back. I didn't respond right away. I set my phone down and finished a work call and then looked around the apartment the way I hadn't looked at it before. Not panicked, just looking. Taking inventory of things I hadn't paid attention to when I arrived. That's when I noticed the clock on the kitchen counter. It was a small digital clock, white, the kind you can get anywhere. I couldn't say with certainty it hadn't been there on day one. I'd been too focused on getting set up for work to notice a clock on a counter. But something about it being there now, after the coffee message, made me pick it up. The time was off. Not by much, 4 minutes slow, but it had been plugged in the whole time I was there, and a plugged-in digital clock shouldn't drift. I turned it over in my hands. On the back, where the plug connected, there was a second port. Small, recessed, the kind of port that didn't need to be there for a clock to function. I'm not an electronics expert. I can't tell you what that port was for. I set the clock down on the counter, then picked it up again, then put it in the closet and closed the door. Then I stood in the kitchen for a moment, not really doing anything. I messaged Diane and asked directly whether there were any cameras or monitoring devices in the unit. I told her the listing said no cameras, but I wanted to confirm. Then I waited. 10 minutes passed. I got up and straightened a few things on the counter, moved my laptop bag from the chair to the bedroom and sat back down. I didn't open my laptop. I'm not sure why exactly. Something about the idea of someone watching a screen while I used mine felt uncomfortable in a way I didn't want to examine too closely. I checked my phone instead. Nothing from Diane. 20 minutes. I thought about showering and decided against it. I told myself I wasn't ready to be in a closed room with the water running, where I wouldn't hear anything. That thought, the fact that I'd had it, bothered me more than anything else so far. 30 minutes. I walked through the apartment again slowly. I looked at the smoke detector in the bedroom. I looked at the one in the living room. I looked at the USB charger plugged into the wall near the bed, which I was now certain I hadn't brought with me. I didn't unplug it. I pushed the bed slightly so it wasn't directly facing it. That felt both reasonable and ridiculous at the same time. 40 minutes after I'd sent the message, Diane responded. She said there were no interior cameras, that there was a doorbell camera at the front entrance disclosed in the building rules, and that this was standard for all units in the complex. I asked her to send me the building rules. She said she'd have to find them and would get back to me. She never did. I thought about that response for the rest of the evening. Not so much what she said, but how long it took her to say it. 40 minutes to type 2 sentences. What was she doing during that time? Checking something, moving something, deciding on a version of events that would satisfy me without giving me anything concrete. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But 40 minutes is a long time when the question is a simple yes or no. That night I slept with the bedside lamp on. Not because I made a conscious decision to, just because I never turned it off. I woke up a few times and each time I lay still for a moment and listened before I moved. In the morning, I noticed the clock was back on the kitchen counter. I'd put it in the closet. The closet door was still closed. The clock was on the counter. I stood there and thought about whether I could have taken it back out at some point without remembering. I'd had a couple of drinks the night before. I'd gotten up once in the night to use the bathroom. I could not rule it out. I also could not convince myself it was what had happened. I was supposed to leave Friday. I left Wednesday evening. I packed methodically, took my time, made sure I had everything. I didn't rush because I didn't want to look like I was rushing, which is a strange thing to think about when you're alone in an apartment. But I thought it. I took my bags to the car in 2 trips, came back up for the last one and did a final check of the rooms. Before I left, I took a photo of the clock on the counter. I don't know why exactly. Documentation, maybe. Something to look at later when I was trying to figure out if I'd imagined it. I drove to a Marriott and paid out of pocket for 2 nights. I sat in that hotel room for a while without turning on the TV and thought about what I actually had. A message about a coffee cabinet. A clock with an extra port that was 4 minutes slow. A 40-minute wait for a 2-sentence response. A clock that may or may not have moved. When I got home, I filed a report with Airbnb's trust and safety team. I told them I suspected undisclosed monitoring devices might be present and that the host's behavior had made me uncomfortable. I was careful with my language. I used the word suspected. I said I couldn't confirm anything. They responded about 10 days later and said they'd looked into the matter and found no policy violations. Diane's listing was still active the last time I checked. Still a 4.8. I brought an RF detector on my next trip. $30 on Amazon. I felt slightly ridiculous the first time I used it. I used it anyway. I've used it on every trip since. I still have the photo of the clock on my phone. Sometimes I open it and look at it and try to decide what it is. Most of the time I think it's just a clock. Sometimes I think about that extra port and the 4 minutes and the 40 minutes and the coffee cabinet, and I'm not sure what I think. That's where I've landed with it. Not certainty. Just a version of events I can't quite close.